Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season 1 finale of The Gentleman. A great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So immediately we have the opening to the episode where Susie is having her meeting with the gospel. He's meeting with Jack and being like, oh no, like your brother's spirit is strong and it's all going to kind of work out. And she's kind of being like, yeah, sure, okay. And kind of sending him on his way to go after Eddie and his family, which I said last episode of like, oh, the irony is most likely Bobby and Eddie like worked out a deal and stuff because Eddie betrayed Stanley, but she doesn't know that. I mean, once again, he was already betraying her behind her back. He's just now doubling back on his double back against, it's a triple cross type of situation of he was already going to go behind her back to work with Stanley, but now he's going up against Stanley in order to help her, but she doesn't realize that at the time, so she's going after her revenge for him double crossing her. So it's a complicated mess, and she doesn't find out until her dad lets her know, and it's like, well, that bell's already been rung, so the gospel's already on the property, ready to rock and roll. Fact is, Jeffrey comes out locked and loaded, and it's like, this is a lot, Jeffrey. He's like, well, my job is to get rid of Vermin, Your Grace. And it's like, dude. And I also love that whole sequence really quickly before, like, just breaking it down in general. I love that we're, like, locked and loaded. You think it's going, oh my God, this is going to be like a gun battle, and then it doesn't happen. I'm curious how people feel about that. I think it's actually dope that it didn't happen, it didn't pop off, especially when Eddie fired the first shot later on. You're almost like, oh, shit's about to pop off regardless. But then it's like, no. Luckily, Bobby ended up calling in the favor and the gospel bounced. But it's like, I love that we have all this set up for a drag out, like bullets flying, big action sequence. And it's like, nah, it didn't happen. It's almost funny because you're like, yeah, it's kind of like, it's more interesting that way of like, oh, you almost get hyped up for it, but it's also like, it's kind of a nice twist that it didn't happen. Also, I guarantee you, production wise, it's super cheap not having to actually film that. So, I think it'd be funny if like production wise, kind of like similar to like the whole point of like the thing you hear about the original Deadpool, that basically there was supposed to be this massive action sequence, but basically they cut like that whole last section, and the final like act of that movie, like that whole sequence became what it became, but it was supposed to be much bigger, but they wrote it in the plot to be like, oh no, like, yeah, that whole action sequence you had planned, it's not going to happen because all the guns were still in the taxi. I wonder if it's kind of been something like that. It's like, nah, we'll set it up like we're going to do it, but then we're just going to cut the whole action scene. I'm curious if it's something like that, or whether it's just always meant to play out a little jokey like that. But you got to admit, your boy Freddy was ready to sacrifice himself, because for him it's like, even if the gospel doesn't kill me, I'm always going to be the fuck up that I am, and I'm going to continue to fuck up if I'm live, and like, let me do this. I've always been a big old prick. Let me sacrifice myself for the family. Which obviously for Eddie, it's like, no, that's just blood, death, and violence. It's not going to resolve anything. And the fact is, we need you. I need you, because yes, you're a prick, but at the end of the day, you're my brother, you're family, so we look after for each other. So everyone's locked and loaded except for Freddy, because it's like, Freddy's like, no, I'm not getting a gun. It's like, we've seen multiple times throughout the show, you can't hit shit. So it's like, we're not about to give you a gun for you to kind of pop off. It's like, no, we're not doing that. So everyone else is kind of getting locked and loaded. I love Jimmy being the pacifist, so he's like, yeah, he's going to go downstairs with Sabrina, Charlie, and the rest of the staff. And everyone's locked and loaded and ready, but like I said, Bobby called in his favor, and lo and behold, the whole deal got called off. I don't remember, maybe he specified, I don't remember what Bobby actually offered him. I think he paid him or something. Right, he paid him, and then he was basically like, you are going to have to basically pay me back for that. And now I just love that whole awkward silent scene of just Eddie and Susie looking at each other. It's like, well, we kind of went behind each other's back. She kind of sent people to kill my family, but she did come through in the end. So it's like, weird back and forth we've had. Despite us being good, we were in an awkward space, and now we're still in that awkward space, but we're past that. So now Bobby's like, cool, I'm going to actually be selling my business. Like, it's like, it's not what it used to be. So at the end of the day, I'm going to sell my business. You guys are going to set up a bid. And I do like that he's very feels very old school, obviously using the birds and stuff. I love that he used that story of use one particular carrier pigeon story from like the Great War. He was like, which I can only assume, like, since he says like the Great War, which is so weird to say that considering like there were two world wars, but I guess like I think historically World War One is known as the Great War because it's like it was the first one of its kind, and it's just like it kind of has the benefit of being number one and not World War Two, which was the sequel. I guess that's a justification, but I think that's my history. My knowledge of history is god awful. I've mentioned it time and time again, but I think World War One is referred to as the Great War. But either way, he was making the whole point of this carrier pigeon got shot through the chest, lost an eye, one of its legs got dangled, but it still did its job delivering the message it was supposed to, and it got rewarded a medal. And it's like, I need you guys to be that for me because you guys have worked so well as a team. Anyone knows that productivity has been up because you two make a hell of a team. So put all your beef aside and work together. And even Eddie had commented, like, why haven't you said anything, like, to your father? She's kind of like, yeah, it's his operation. I can't really question him on it. He can do whatever he wants to with it, even though she's the one that's been running it for years. Obviously, at least 4 years, because he's been locked up that long, but probably even longer. Because for her, it's like, the most frustrating thing is she has followed his orders because she wants to be the good soldier, because if she's able to be good, like, eventually, like, her dad will fully give it to her without her having to always answer to him. But it's like for her, it's like my dad has kind of ignored me time and time again over the years because she's always wanted to expand the business. It's I love the metaphor she goes for where it's like, right, the goose that's laying the golden eggs, eventually you get so used to the golden eggs you focus on that. It's like, well, this is just to be expected, not seeing the bigger picture of there's so much more at play here, but you're so comfortable, you become complacent in a lot of ways where she hasn't. But every time she wants to take things further, her father shoots it down. So now they've got to set up the bits. I love the roll through of like every character we've met over the course of the show. They visit them for because they're setting up the bets. Initially, Susie and Eddie go their separate ways, and then Eddie got talking to Freddie, where Freddie wants to kind of put his own bid in as well, but it's like, you're not cut out for this, brother. And it's interesting because he tells this story of, oh, there was a time we shot a deer. I shot it. Dad was so proud of me, but when it came to time to like finish it because I didn't kill it, I couldn't do it. And Eddie, you swooped in, Dad gave you the knife, and you slit its throat without hesitation. And it's like, the argument could be like, well, did Eddie do it because it's like he's just always been that guy, he's this good soldier? Or was there a little bit of, well, I'm doing this thing a favor because if I don't do it, it's going to suffer, and this is the best way? Like, I think there's some ambiguity in that. I guess it's also about perspective, like how you view Eddie in that moment. And I think that represents the dichotomy that is Eddie, that he can be hardcore and ruthless if he needs to be, but he can also be very compassionate, and he does, he's a caring person in some regards. I mean, once again, that's the like dichotomy of any human person. But I think that story, you would immediately go like, oh yeah, he's cutthroat, we've seen that, so he could do it. But I think there is also that element of, yeah, you're doing that out of mercy. So I think that story doesn't fully lean one way more than the other. I think it just comes down to your perspective. You could see it being like, what it speaks more about Eddie being a gangster, which is what Freddie took from it, It's like, oh, you might say, I'm not built for this, but you always were. I think it just also showcases how Freddie's always felt this inadequacy to his brother. He's like, once again, I'm supposed to be the older son. So even though him popping off on episode 1 about, everything being taken from him, even now he's still like, oh, like, you just want it all for yourself. It's like, you want me out of the way. It's like, no, brother, remember, you're the one that actually wanted me out of the way. He's like, all right, touche. I can't really rebuttal that. But it's just everything compiled for so long of just Eddie being the golden child and Freddie just being the fuck up, so that kind of, they fell into those dynamics more and more. So I think it's a situation where Freddie just got so used to that role, he kind of fell into that place, and he thought this was my opportunity to rise above that, and he got shafted by his father. So, but it's a situation, as he's kind of gained some clarity in the aftermath of this whole shenanigan-filled adventure, that it's like, right, this should be yours. You are actually good at this, bro. And it's something he was thinking about. And so because of that, he starts making moves of his own. We proceed to have Eddie go have a sit down with everyone. Like, he's setting up dealings with everyone we've known over the course of the show. He eventually links up with Susie, because at first he was gathering money from Some money he had stocked up on his own. His mom sold some stocks and stuff like that. Even had to sell something of her mom's, I think, to cover like the 10 mil. Meet up with like the 12 other lords to have them put like 10% in. They could reach out to Susie, but Eddie's like, I know that's not going to work. But his mom did. Mom doing all the secret plays. Her play with the whole like neighbor of theirs came through in the end. So, and that kind of doubly worked out for the business. So granted, Eddie's play and everything worked out, but ultimately, you had your mom coming through and benefiting that situation as well. But she's the one that visited Susie, and it was a whole conversation about don't do what your father says or don't even listen to my son. At the end of the day, it's better to regret what you did do. That will weigh less heavy on you rather than the regrets of what you didn't do. And so she has to determine, like, obviously she loves her brother. That's all she wants to focus on. But she also loves the business because she's really, really good at it. And it's been hers to kind of run with for a while. And she's proven herself even though her dad won't acknowledge it. So the two of them link up because Eddie ended up, he also went to meet up with what's-his-face too. I forgot. They went to meet with everyone else together initially, which I thought was dope. It's like I said, bringing back everyone. We got Peter back, and he's kind of meant to reach out to like some Russian criminals. We had Mercy's return, and she's acting on behalf of a South American cartel. And then you also had the return of obviously Stanley, which he's got his role to play in all this. It's like, right, we know what your bid is, what your play is. We know the manipulation that you were behind Henry and everything. Like, he's like, oh yeah, like I heard about the destabilization of like, blockades at your borders for like your product and stuff. It's like, we know you're behind it. He was like, you turned down my first offer, so I wanted your dad to know that I was serious. And it's like, they kind of painted it previously like, oh, like Henry going as hard as he did. It seemed like, from what we know, and maybe that's just Stanley playing it off like, oh, like it's an unfortunate accident, but he's trying to make it seem like he didn't co-sign that. Like, that could have just been their imagination of, and maybe he co-signed some of it, but not for things to go as hard as they did, but Henry wanted to make a point. So that was kind of his own thing. That wasn't necessarily Stanley's. Also answers the biggest question of, well, I finally got the dude's name right, and finally remembered the dude's name at the end of this, like, because they finally say it. It's Mr. Stevens. I was wondering, like, was this his whole thing, or was he working for Stanley? He was, in fact, doing everything for his client. Like I said, I was so back and forth with it for so long. Just like I didn't, like I said, it was my recurring thing of like, I don't know who fully works for who. We actually saw Gabrielle, speaking of her real quickly, because she is still working for the glasses. So I think maybe going forward we would see her more. Like her and Jimmy were like playing like, I don't know if it was like chess or something that they were playing. And we only saw her for like one shot, which I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat to know she's around. To be fair, she was kind of put on a payroll last episode. But you thought maybe that was all said and done. But it's like, maybe for now you're still needed, but also Jimmy is going to want her to survive. So, and Susie hasn't put a bullet in her head yet. So she hasn't wronged them to the same extent that Henry did. So there's a little more cushion for forgiveness when it comes to that in that capacity. But yeah, like trying to set up dealings with everyone. I love that. What's his face? Peter. His byproduct. He's like, no. The ass whooping I got. He's like, you really don't understand anything until you've gotten your ass whooped. And he's like, now beaten within an inch of your life. And he's like, yeah, it gave me perspective and realized that the world is run by power and it's out there for the grabbing. So I thought that was interesting. Stanley thought he had the upper hand, like in this argument and everything, but it's like, yeah, the whole list was a fake, like I figured as much, and it's just the fam back at the estate, just like answering the phone and putting on different voice. I love that. It's like, wow, you were had. So he doesn't have the advantage in his bidding like he does. He thought he was coming from a place of strength. It's like, no, you're kind of on the same even footing as everyone else. So those bets were kind of set in, and then Eddie embarked on his journey of gathering allies to do this. And I love that whole sequence and reveal of, okay, this is how it actually goes. First and foremost, Stanley, like, he thinks he wants, he did put the most substantial bid in, but the problem is he doesn't really have that capital like that, because Eddie was like, yeah, I know there's something funny with his money. And so basically he had been avoiding taxes. They had tracked down the information because they knew, they followed Stevens, and they went to Henry's, like, guy, the bookie guy from, like, last episode and the episode before, from episode 6 and 7, that guy, the money guy, to, like, send all that to the police. So Stanley gets arrested, removes him from the board. They tricked Mercy into believing Peter was the second one, but no, he wasn't. So they got Mercy to remove Peter from the equation, and then Henry removed Mercy from the equation, which I love. Sabrina being like, oh, at least someone's taking care of her, poor lady. And then Eddie's like, ooh. And then Freddy's beside his mom about to explain it. He's almost like, Mom. But it's like, no. It's like, wait, isn't that dude Stevens the same dude that fixed the fight? Are you really going to be okay with that? And it's like, oh, no, he's going to be taken care of as well. So I was like, yeah, like, removing everyone from the board, really quickly, I do think it's so interesting that most of the characters we've come to know have been removed from the board, the ones that we got to know. Like, Mercy's dead, Peter's dead, ultimately, Henry's dead as well. The only one that's still out and about that we met this season is the Gospel. So he's kind of out and about. So, always room for him to return in some capacity. But yeah, ultimately, everything works out. And now the bidding comes down to our crew. And Bobby makes the reveal of, no, I wasn't actually planning on actually selling the business. It was just to be insightful and motivate, because, like, it's easy to kind of work for a business, as Sally even puts it. It's like, I'm an employee just like you, Eddie. Like, I'm not the boss of this. I'm just an employee just like you. He's like, I wanted to see your commitment to this. And you can't be committed to something unless you're willing to put your own skin in the game. And now you've both invested in it. It's like, yeah, I'm going to run things for a couple more years. And who knows if retirement's out there. Which I think is kind of ironic because, well, you have Susie hoping this would be her opportunity, which is ironic considering, like, hey, you kept moving the goalposts for Eddie, and now the goalpost is getting moved from you. So it's almost karma striking in a way. So that's where things kind of end up. But it's like, yeah, you're going to run the business together, and it's going to grow, and we're going to make a lot of money, so on and so forth. So other elements to this whole situation, we had I love the conversation between Sabrina and Charlie, where Charlie's like, yeah, Jeff has been acting weird. She's like, what? I have no idea what. And her mom's terrible at it, and Charlie knows, like, something's up. Like, what's up with that? And she's quickly to change the subject. And so later on, Charlie talks to Jeff, and she's like, I'm kind of wondering, she's like, the fact is, all throughout my life, when I thought about my childhood, you were always there to teach me everything. So she's like, I'm kind of wondering, are you, because she's like, it kind of makes a lot of sense. But initially he won't say anything. And she's like, well, okay, and kind of walks away. But it's like, I thought you'd be ashamed. She's like, I can never be ashamed of you. You are the best man that I've ever known. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. So it didn't turn into a problem. I'm curious how Sabrina's going to feel about it. We didn't get that scene, but I'm curious how she feels about it. I mean, even by the end of the episode, does she know that Charlie knows that Jeff is her bio dad? Are you going to let Freddie and Eddie in on that? I'm curious if Eddie's going to be like, I kind of had some idea, but it wasn't my secret to say anything about. Or what is he going to be just as blindsided as Freddie? I'm curious to know what Freddie's reaction to that's going to be. Because I'm also curious, too, like, did their dad know? That was kind of like my big question too. It's kind of a moot point, but I'm curious, like, him knowing or not knowing could have effects on things. Not present day, but it could have had effects on things over the course of the years if he knew that Charlotte was Jeff's kid. It's very poetic that obviously once again Henry is taken care of. I think it's so interesting that it was Eddie who did it and not Susie, but it's also like, right, this is part of his journey, so he's gotten his hands dirty before, but it's always been kind of more in a self-defense thing. Typically, it's been in self-defense, but it's a situation of like, no, this is when he purposely goes full gangster, doesn't even look, and pops him. So that was an interesting development. It's like, right, it's kind of makes things even between him and Susie, because it's like, right, you got your get back. Now the bastard, like, he served his purpose. We actually, anything that falls back will fall on him. So, which I think is also like nice to kind of have that storyline come around that way, considering, well, she had Jethro killed, so now it's up to Eddie to kind of, it feels more poetic for him to do this. It's not a apples to oranges from Jethro to Henry. We're very different situations, but her being responsible for Jethro, him being responsible for Henry, it feels very befitting. So the ending of the episode skips 3 months later, and we see Bobby's still in prison. I mean, once again, he's still got 7 years. I don't know if that accounts for good behavior or not, but well, not 7 years, 6 years. But once again, I don't know if that includes any good behavior and stuff like that, because he's supposed to be doing a 10-year stint, so he might be getting out a little sooner, whatever the case may be. But he was sitting down with someone. I'm like, it's got to be Stanley, right? And there they are. So, I mean, it all works out. I mean, he's not directly involved, but I wonder, he's got to know that Susie and Eddie had some responsibility for getting him locked up. But he's talking with Bobby, and new business opportunities can come about because of that. But he could also kind of go a little revengey. Like I said, other than Gospel, he's the only other person left standing. Granted, Gospel's out and about. He's still locked up in prison, but he has enough power and connections, despite his assets were frozen, so he might not be as much of an issue. Stevens is potentially still out there. It seems like he's the only one that was arrested. Stan, so we don't know what that future is going to hold in that capacity, but I wasn't quite sure where things were going to land. I mean, it makes a lot of sense that Eddie would double down and yeah, we're doubling down into this, and his family kind of generally supports him, but it's now, I mean, we're 3 months into it, and we haven't really gotten to see what kind of effect it has on Eddie's family, but I'm so curious to see where that goes, how this has changed their lives. Charlotte was pretty far along, so in that 3 month period, she might have had her child too, so that is something to consider as well. But yeah, I mean, an exciting, just a great show in general. I'm very excited and hopeful for a second season. It's only been out for a couple days. It's Monday morning at the time you're recording this. What is it, the 11th? And so it hasn't been announced. Like I said, it's only been out for 4 days, roughly speaking. So Netflix doesn't always jump on stuff immediately like this, so we'll probably be waiting a while. Some of the stuff I've seen online seems from what I've seen, the show does seem to be pretty well received, but that doesn't mean jack shit. And at the end of the day, it also comes down to viewership. I think it's in the top 10, at least here in the U.S. I don't know, it needs to be in the top 10s for a while across multiple countries to really... That determines a lot. So, but it doesn't matter. Even if a show is well received enough, that doesn't mean shit if not enough people are watching it. But it's in the top 10 for now, so we'll see how long it stays in there. That'll be probably a big contributing factor. It still won't guarantee anything, because even being in the top doesn't guarantee, because it depends on how long you've been there, how many countries you were in the top 10, and how many people watch. So all that are factors to consider. But from the little bit I was gleaming just from a quick Google search, the words kind of toted around are, it seems likely that the show will get a second season. Apparently Guy Ritchie has already kind of talked about, he's already got ideas for season 2, so I'd love to see what other crazy characters we get in season 2, the continued development of these relationships and developments. Oh yeah, because I also forgot, we're also going to be dealing with the Travelers, because JP is part of their distribution. So we'll be probably getting more of them in the future to some extent, but also what are the characters? Will the Gospel ever return? How will Freddy fuck things up in the future? Because he will. But what kind of role everyone in the family is going to play going forward? What about Susie and Eddie's relationship? Will that turn more romantic, or will it just stay purely platonic? Business-wise, I don't think it will. I think it feels like the writing's on the wall for it to be something more. once again, who knows what happened when they were like during the Travelers episode when they were drinking and partying and don't remember stuff. Like, we never really got a clear idea of everything that happened, but Susie made it clear like they're just associates. But it seems very, very likely that that's very, very likely to change. But who knows? We'll see. Also, like I said, I brought up before, Jimmy and Gabrielle, like what the future holds for that. We might be seeing more of her, considering she's kind of working for Susie and them. So, I'm hopeful for a season 2 because I'd love to see where all of this ends up taking us, and like I said, like what new characters and crazy circumstances we'll find ourselves in. Because we haven't really seen Eddie fully gangster role. He's kind of partaken in it. He's balanced being a gangster, being a duke, looking out for his family. He's balanced those roles. But yeah, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And so finding that balance will probably be a lot harder going forward. So I'm sure that will be a major part of season 2's story, is juggling all of this. Even more so, because he wasn't really juggling as much, because it's like, right, I'm playing these roles, but it's all for the greater purpose of getting us out of the business. Now we've doubled down. I've got to make more of a point of juggling these roles. Because we haven't really seen him having to do too much as the Duke, because everything Duke related was about getting out of the biz. So I don't know what that means in the grand scheme of things, in the greater context of England, like being a duke, what roles I don't think there's any roles you have to necessarily fulfill in the grand scheme of things. But once again, I'm ignorant on a lot of that stuff on the more British side of things, of like dukes and what they actually do and what roles they play. Because like all we ever, like I said, focus on was his side of the business, because that's the more interesting side of things. So I wonder, will there be any clashing with the other 12 dukedoms? Probably not. I mean, he knows who they are now, and they're aware of Eddie because he reached out to them for the whole gathering of money things. So, well, I wonder, will anything more come of that? Whether the future competition they'll have to deal with. And once again, Stanley's still in the picture, so we'll definitely be getting more Giancarlo Esposito in the future as well. So, but either way, like I said, fingers crossed, hopeful we get a season 2 announcement. At least decently soon. I won't expect extremely, in the next week or two. I doubt that, but maybe in the next few weeks or maybe month or so, maybe we get some announcements about a potential season 2. But either way, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.